Hi guys, and thanks for tuning in again. Welcome to a new video. And this, I think, is a comparison a lot of people wanted to see early on. In this video, I'm going to compare the new Xperia 10 Mark II versus the original Xperia 10 from last year.
Like this, for that. Can you feel me, God? Can you feel me, star? Can you feel me?
So first things first, let's look at their physical designs. I have to say, more or less, the phone has remained the same for about 90% of everything. Of course, if we just talk about the dimensions, it seems on paper that the Xperia 10 Mark II should be slightly taller, and the Xperia 10, original Xperia 10, should be slightly wider. So that's pretty interesting. If we talk about the screens, that diagonal has remained the same, 6 inches. I believe the Xperia is a little bit thinner and also 10 grams lighter than the original Xperia 10. What is interesting though is that, as I already suspected, the original Xperia 10 has a slightly better screen to body ratio. I think at around 80%, and this one is around 77%. And that's because of the biggest change that I've noticed, and that is, as I suspected in my previous video, the chin. So here there is like an extra chin, but it does occupy or house the front-facing speaker, which is pretty welcome, and that does output much better sound than the original Xperia 10. But what you get in the original Xperia 10 is almost an iPhone-like bezel-less bottom, which is pretty nice. Talking about the other hardware differences, this one has Gorilla Glass 5 on the front, whereas this one has Gorilla Glass 6. PPI of the screen is exactly the same, resolution of the screen is exactly the same, so stretched 21 by 9 full HD screens, although the big difference is, as you can already tell, is OLED, and this one has an IPS LCD display. Although surprisingly, I think they go toe-to-toe when it comes to max brightness, which is pretty good. Brightness on the Xperia 10 was already pretty good, but that's still about the same on the Xperia 10 Mark II. Now, if we go to the side of the devices, that's where one of the major differences took place. So here you see it's not looking in particularly good shape in my opinion. You see the fingerprint scanner right here, and here the separate power button. And here we have a volume rocker down here. And on the Xperia 10 it's slightly different. So we have the fingerprint scanner integrated into the power button like we had in previous Xperia, surprisingly, before the Xperia 10. And we have the volume rocker on the top. So that's a pretty interesting difference. And as I already mentioned in my last video, what I already thought was true is that they don't have any camera button anymore. So that's a slight bummer to me. I know a lot of people like that in their phones, and Sony was one of the last ones together with Nokia to have this feature on their phones. So if we go to the back, that's where you can really tell a difference that that 1 year has passed between the two of them. This one still has a dual camera, so I believe a 8 megapixel camera and a 5 megapixel camera, and this one has a triple lens system, so that's a 12 megapixel camera and two 8 megapixel cameras. One of them is a wide angle lens and the other one is a telephoto lens. So that's also pretty interesting, a completely different camera setup. What is curiously the same is the camera on the front. That still remains an 8 megapixel camera with the same aperture, I think of 2.2. Although on the Xperia 10 II you are now able to also do HDR photos and videos from the front camera. So if we go back to the specs, they're both running Android 10, so that's pretty interesting. The Xperia 10 has been updated by Sony, which is really nice. So you know that even if you buy an older Sony phone, even if it's mid-range, you'll still get at least one big update, so that's very nice. to see. So of course they are both running Qualcomm Snapdragons. This one has the 635 from last year, very popular processor. Not particularly fast, but it does the job. Especially graphically, you'll notice that this is, for instance, not really fitted to run heavier titles like PUBG Mobile or Fortnite. Whereas this one has the Snapdragon 665, which is particularly more powerful, especially when it comes to the graphical performance. So that is one of the big upgrades together with the screen. So again, differences in specs wise, on here we have 128 gigabytes as standard with 4 gigabytes of RAM, and here we have 64 gigabytes as standard, also with 4 gigabytes of RAM. They both also retain their 3.5mm jacks, which are both located on the left side. We have a 3600 milliamp hour battery on the Xperia Mark II, and I believe a 2700 or 2800 milliamp hour battery on the Xperia 10 from last year. On the Xperia 10 Mark II, we do have IP certification, which the Xperia 10 does not have. So the biggest difference you'll actually find is on the back of these two phones. So let me just lock them both. Because here we see a triple camera array, and here we have a dual camera lens. So we have two modules on the back here. It's Xperia 10. One is 13 megapixels and the other is 5 megapixels. This one has 12 megapixels surprisingly, so a little lower resolution, and two 8 megapixel cameras. One is a wide angle lens and one is a zoom lens, a telephoto lens. So that's a very nice feature that that they put on the new Xperia 10 Mark II. So if we take a look in the difference in camera quality, I'd say it's significant, you know, the color rendering and the detail. So if we both take a picture of the same object here. Although surprisingly, it does seem like the shutter on the Xperia 10 responds a bit faster. So here we have the Xperia 10 with a pretty nice image, I must say. Pretty good sharpness. Although the color has been somewhat oversaturated, it's a little bit, how do we say, exaggerated actually, the orange color. As you can see here, this is what it actually looks like, and this is what it looks like on this phone. And then you see on the Xperia 10 Mark II, you see even more detail and a much better representation of the color. So I'd say overall the camera in terms of sharpness are comparable, but yeah, let's say color accuracy, contrast is much improved on the Xperia 10 Mark II. So really quickly about the fact again that this phone is actually running Android 10, the new Xperia, the last year's Xperia. Last year's Xperia 10. So that's a very nice feature, and yeah, we see things like, let me see, things like dark mode are visible now. So that's very nice to have. Very well done. So I'd say that really does add some points to the Xperia 10. What I can also quickly check for you guys is the gestures. So it actually has 3 gesture modes: the old Android 9 gesture mode with the pill, and also the new modern gesture mode, which I don't like that much, but hey, if people like it, why not? So that's pretty cool that it actually has that. I'm gonna put it right back to buttons. So that's just a little extra that I want to show people curious or thinking about getting last year's Xperia 10, that is actually enabled on here. So let's actually check video quality on screen quality and video quality at on both of the phones. So I'd say video quality, video experience is about the same, but as you can see, color and saturation, contrast, yeah, are just largely improved on the OLED screen of the Xperia 10 Mark II. So you also see viewing angles also much better. So you really see that the colors change on the top on the old Xperia, whereas here colors remain the same mostly. Although for an LCD screen, viewing angles are pretty good, but you can really see the shift in brightness. And here you don't have that. Put this one on the top. Yeah, there's no shift in colors at all. Okay. So I'd say video quality is still pretty good on the Xperia 10, but it's much improved on the Xperia 10 Mark II. Not even the brightness that much, but more the contrast and especially the viewing angles. That's just a lot better, courtesy of the new OLED panel on the Xperia 10 Mark II. So in terms of day-to-day performance, I'd say the Xperia 10 Mark II slightly faster. As you can see, it's just the touch response and screen rotation and stuff like that. It's slightly faster, better. You see also returning to the home screen or going to the previous application. Okay. And swiping feels about the same. That was already pretty smooth experience on the Xperia 10, the normal one. So there's not much difference there. So if we can just let me just check if I have a game installed for you guys, which I believe I have. Let's do Subway Server. And you see again, touch response on the Xperia 10 Mark II must have been improved by a few frame rates, because you just see that that's just yeah, much more responsive to the touch basically. So game loading times isn't really fair to compare, since I had to set both of the games up. And again, you see the touch response is just much faster. Okay, this is an impossible job, but you get my point here. Gaming is pretty decent on both, but like I said, these are like the casual games, so they should be fine for that. And you really want to have the Xperia 10 Mark II if you plan on doing any sort of heavier gaming. And again, you see the Xperia 10 Mark II a lot quicker to return to the home screen. So battery life, I gotta say, on both is pretty good. You easily get through a day, maybe 1.5 days, even though this one has a larger 3600 milliamp hour battery, and this one has, I think, somewhere below 3000 milliamp hour. So that's not really hasn't really made a big difference. And like I said, screen brightness and such is about the same, but the quality, especially in contrast and most noticeable, the viewing angles are much better on the Xperia Mark II. What I do find interesting is, though, like I said, the album app crashes on the Xperia 10 Mark II running Android 10, while on here the album app is working just fine. You know, that's pretty weird to me, but I think Sony purposely disabled the album app to work on the newer Xperias. Even though the older Xperias, when they won Android 10, do still have the ability to use the album app. So that's pretty interesting. So overall, what are my conclusions? It's not many times that I get to say this, but the Xperia 10 from last year is still a very, very good buy, especially now. I think the price difference is about 100 to 150 euros between the Xperia 10 from last year, the original one, and the new one from this year. And like I said, you really need to determine for yourself, are you a heavier user or are you just a casual user of your phone? Because if you're a casual user, the Xperia 10 will still do you fine. But if you want a phone that's gonna last even longer and be that much quicker, also with heavier applications, then I would definitely recommend the Xperia Mark II. And also when you come to camera, of course, I mean, that's a big difference as well. This camera is much more versatile. So you have 3 lenses. You know, you can just tap them and you see like so much that you can actually change on them. So you see you have a wide angle lens, a telephoto lens, and a normal lens. So I think you can even switch between the lenses like this, which is pretty cool. So if I just yeah, so that's really, if the camera is important to you, then I would definitely recommend going for the Xperia 10 Mark II, because that's just a modern camera experience if you want to have a versatile camera. If you just want a camera that takes okay pictures, then the Xperia 10 is fine as well. The cameras on it weren't the best in its price range, but far from the worst as well. So yeah, guys, this has been my versus video. Both good phones again, but just determine how much you're willing to spend and exactly how much you need from a phone. So this has been it for Guest 75 again on this comparison between the Xperia 10 Mark II and the original Xperia 10. Let me know in the comments if there's anything extra you want to see. Of course, I'm still working on a full review where I'll be checking out the camera on the Xperia 10 Mark II. And also let me know if you want to have a separate video on the Xperia 10 running Android 10, because that's a very, again, very, very nice that you get the latest software experience on here also. So yeah, guys, thanks for tuning in. And I forgot to ask you in my last video, don't forget to subscribe if you like what you're seeing. And I'll see you guys in my next video.